If you're a college student who loves a good scare, then you need to hear about Tariq and Dante's nightmare at Fort George. It was an ordinary college day at TMCC as the sun sprinkled its heat over campus. Tariq and Dante were headed to history class, casually chatting. The bell rang and Professor McIntyre announced their next assignment. Go in groups of 2 and stay 1 day at a historic site. Write your experience in a journal, he said, holding up a hat filled with slips of paper. Tariq picked a slip. His stomach sank. Fort George. Dante saw the dread on his friend's face, but shrugged it off. Saturday arrived. Dante's dad dropped them at the fort's entrance. The wind howled through hollow corridors, carrying faint echoes of forgotten cries. Ancient stone walls loomed, casting shadows in the fading sunlight. They had no idea they were about to disturb something far older and far more malevolent than the fort's crumbling facade. The fort's labyrinthine halls were colder than expected, the air thick with the weight of history. The two boys explored for hours, jotting down notes and taking photos, but as night began to fall, something shifted. A cold gust of wind swept through the fort, and suddenly Tariq froze. "Dante, do you hear that?" Dante stopped and strained his ears. Faint whispers echoed through the corridors, growing louder with each passing second. Then a figure appeared, a ghostly silhouette of a man in military uniform, his eyes hollow, his face twisted in agony. "The truth is buried," the figure rasped, its voice like wind through broken glass. "We are bound here until it is told." The figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving Dante and Tariq standing in the eerie silence. Tariq's voice trembled. "That was real, right? We actually saw that?" Dante nodded, barely able to speak. "We need to figure out what he was talking about." They found an old sealed-off section of the fort, untouched for decades. Inside, a journal lay on a wooden table, its cover bearing the name Captain Jean-Luc Duval. Tariq and Dante flipped through its pages, uncovering the chilling truth. Duval had betrayed his own men, locking them in a sealed chamber as he attempted to flee from an impending British attack. The men starved and died in agony, their souls trapped in the fort ever since. "The spirits, they're trapped here," Tariq said, "because of what happened to them. They want us to uncover the truth," Dante realized.
As Tariq and Dante dug deeper into the journal, it became clear that the soldiers trapped by Duval weren't the only ones haunting Fort George. There was a presence, a weight in the air that neither of them could explain. It felt more recent. "I don't think it's just about Duval's betrayal," Tariq said. "It's been touched by more than one tragedy." Dante furrowed his brow. "You think Bishop?" Tariq nodded, his voice quiet. "Maurice Bishop. He was executed here in 1983, right on these grounds. I think the spirits we saw aren't just from Duval's time, they're from the revolution too. Maurice Bishop, the revolutionary leader who fought for a new socialist Grenada, had been executed by his own government during a violent coup. The soldiers who carried out the order had gunned down Bishop and his comrades in cold blood at Fort George. Their betrayal echoed the horrors of Duval's treachery centuries before. "We need to go back," Tariq said, determination hardening his voice. "We need to find out if Bishop's story is part of this."
The boys returned to Fort George under the cover of dusk, armed with flashlights and notebooks. The deeper they ventured into the fort, the stronger the sense of dread became. Finally, they reached the execution site, where Bishop had been gunned down. The temperature plummeted. A figure materialized before them, not in the uniform of a colonial soldier, but in the clothes of a modern man. His face was unmistakable, Maurice Bishop himself. His eyes were filled with sorrow and determination, as though his mission had never truly ended. "They silenced us," Bishop said, his voice echoing through the fort. "But our dream lives on." Tariq's breath caught in his throat. "Why are you still here?" "We were betrayed," Bishop continued. "Just like Duval's men. They buried our truth with us. You must tell our story." Suddenly, more figures appeared. Bishop's comrades, men and women who had fought for a brighter future, now trapped in the fort's walls. Their faces carried the weight of untold suffering. Dante swallowed hard. "We'll tell your story. The world needs to know what really happened." The spirits of Bishop and his comrades faded slowly, but not before Bishop's parting words echoed through the air. "Do not fail us, or you will join us."
Tariq and Dante returned to the college library, their minds racing with the knowledge they now carried. They wrote down everything: Duval's betrayal, Bishop's execution, the untold horrors buried at Fort George. They meticulously documented the journal's contents, including Bishop's final plea for the truth to be revealed. The revolution hadn't just been a political struggle, it had been a betrayal from within. Bishop's vision had been silenced, his followers executed unjustly, and their story buried in the shadow of history. With their report in hand, they submitted it to their professor, who was stunned by their discovery. Soon, news of the journal and the truth about both Duval's and Bishop's legacies spread throughout the island. The story made headlines, reigniting discussions about Granada's turbulent past.
Chapter 6. Resting in Peace. A few weeks later, Tariq and Dante returned to Fort George one last time. The site was quieter now, the oppressive weight they had felt before noticeably absent. The fort no longer felt haunted by untold suffering, it felt peaceful. "They're at rest now," Tariq said softly. "Bishop, his comrades, Duval's men, they're finally free." Dante nodded. "We told their stories, that's all they wanted." As they turned to leave, the wind picked up, gently sweeping through the corridors. For a brief moment, Tariq thought he heard a voice, faint but clear. "Thank you." Maurice Bishop's final words echoed through the fort, carried on the wind. The truth had been told, and at last the spirits of Fort George were at peace. The end